4.6 billion years ago, there is no Earth, no blue sky, and no oceans. There is only a colossal, spinning, protoplanetary disk of gas and dust around a young, unstable sun. In this cosmic whirlpool, particles collide and stick together under the influence of electrostatic forces, forming rocks, then asteroids, and eventually planetesimals. Gravity begins to sculpt worlds. Our early Earth is not a cradle of life, but a blazing hell. An ocean of molten magma, where heavy elements like iron and nickel sink to the center to form a dense core, while lighter silicates float to the surface. The sky above this boiling world is choked with toxic vapors and constantly pierced by meteorites. But the young planet is not alone in its orbit. Out of the darkness of space, Theia, a wandering protoplanet the size of Mars, looms toward it. Collision is inevitable. The impact occurs at a glancing angle with unimaginable force. Earth's mantle is ripped open. Billions of tons of molten rock are blasted into orbit. Our planet is nearly shattered to pieces. From this spinning ring of debris and dust, gravity quickly gathers a new sphere. Thus, the Moon is born. In those days, it hangs in the sky dozens of times closer than it is now, a giant glowing orb filling half the horizon over the cooling Earth. This catastrophic collision turns out to be a stroke of ultimate luck. The impact tilts Earth's axis, forever setting the rhythm of the changing seasons. And the gravity of the nearby Moon begins to pull at the magma, and later the water, creating colossal tides that will act as a blender for future chemical reactions. Hundreds of millions of years pass. Earth gradually cools down. A thin basalt crust covers the planet, but peace is still a distant dream. The era of the late heavy bombardment begins. Icy comets and asteroids continuously crash into the surface, delivering their precious cargo of water. As the atmospheric temperature drops below the boiling point, the thick clouds of steam enveloping the planet begin to condense. The rain begins. The greatest deluge in the planet's history, which does not stop for millions of years. Water fills the impact craters, floods the lowlands, and soon Earth transforms into a water world. There is almost no dry land. Only the sharp peaks of black volcanoes break through the leaden waves of the global ocean. The sky has a blood-red tint due to the high concentration of carbon dioxide, and the ocean itself appears olive green from the iron dissolved in it. Somewhere within this bottomless, toxic expanse of water lies the greatest secret of the universe. At the bottom of the early oceans, where the Earth's crust cracks open to expose the heat of the mantle, hydrothermal vents, black smokers, spew forth. In the pitch darkness, under colossal pressure, in superheated water saturated with hydrogen sulfide, methane, and ammonia, a miracle occurs. Complex chemistry begins to play a game where only the most stable molecules survive. Amino acids assemble into peptides, and lipids fold into microscopic bubbles called coacervates. Inside these tiny capsules, chemical reactions are shielded from the chaos of the external environment. At some point, which will forever remain hidden from our eyes, chemistry crosses the line. A molecule capable of replicating itself emerges. The first cell is born. Life lays claim to this planet. The first inhabitants of Earth are microscopic prokaryotes. They are blind, deaf, and know nothing of oxygen. They feed on the Earth's chemical energy, but life is expansive. Soon, bacteria migrate to the shallow waters of tidal zones, illuminated by the dim light of the young sun. Here, at the boundary of water and stone, cyanobacteria spark a revolution. They learn to harness an inexhaustible source of energy, sunlight. They invent photosynthesis. Colonies of these microorganisms begin to build stromatolites, layered stone pillars resembling limestone mushrooms. These are the first biological structures on Earth. Millimeter by millimeter, they grow in shallow lagoons, converting carbon dioxide and water into sugars. But photosynthesis has a byproduct, a gas that cyanobacteria release into the water as waste, oxygen. To early anaerobic life, it was toxic. It is a powerful oxidizer, burning their fragile cellular structures. At first, oxygen bound with the iron dissolved in the ocean. The oceans literally rust. trillions of tons of iron oxide settled to the bottom, forming banded iron formations, the very same ores we use today to build our skyscrapers and bridges. But when the iron in the ocean runs out, free oxygen escapes into the atmosphere. About 2.4 billion years ago, the Great Oxidation Event occurs. The sky changes color from red to blue, but for the biosphere, this is an apocalypse. Oxygen poisons almost all life existing at the time. This is the first and perhaps the most massive mass extinction in Earth's history. Anaerobic bacteria die by the trillions, surviving only in deep mud deposits and crevices where the toxic gas cannot penetrate. Life almost destroys itself, but the consequences of the oxygen catastrophe go even further. Oxygen reacts with methane, a potent greenhouse gas that kept the planet warm. As soon as the methane is destroyed, the temperature balance collapses, the Earth rapidly cools, glaciers creep from the poles to the equator, and the oceans freeze to a depth of a kilometer. The era of snowball Earth begins. The planet turns into a dazzlingly white ice ball, reflecting the meager sunlight back into space. It seems like the end. Life is trapped in dark pockets of water beneath kilometer-thick ice, huddling around volcanic oases. The icy captivity lasts for tens of millions of years, but the Earth is alive inside. Volcanoes continue to erupt through the ice sheet, spewing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Since there are no liquid oceans, the gas cannot dissolve and begins to accumulate in the atmosphere. Gradually, the volcanic greenhouse effect takes over. The ice begins to melt, the planet warms up, the oceans thaw, and meltwater rich in minerals washes off the continents, fertilizing the sea. In these warm waters, enriched with oxygen and nutrients, life takes its next giant leap. Cells learn to band together. Multicellular organisms emerge. About 600 million years ago, the Ediacaran biota flourishes on the bottom of shallow seas. This is a strange, alien world. Flat, quilted creatures resembling fern fronds or ribbed discs lie on the soft sand. Dickinsonia, reaching up to a meter in length, slowly crawls across bacterial mats, absorbing nutrients with its entire body. Sprigina and Tribrachidium. They have no jaws, no eyes, and no shells. It is a world without predators, a world of slow, blind existence in harmony with the currents. But this Ediacaran garden is doomed. When conditions change, these soft-bodied creatures will disappear, leaving no direct descendants. They are an evolutionary dead end, a rough draft of evolution. The stage is being cleared for those who will learn to kill and defend themselves. 539 million years ago, an explosion occurs. The Cambrian explosion. Life suddenly invents hard tissues, biomineralization. Shells, spikes, teeth, and claws appear. The ocean turns from a peaceful garden into a brutal battlefield. An evolutionary arms race begins. Eyes appear. First primitive light-sensitive spots, then complex compound structures. Now, the prey can see the predator, and the predator can stalk its prey. Anomalocaris, the first apex predator in Earth's history, glides through the water column. Reaching up to a meter in length, it has huge eyes on stalks, a circular mouth lined with teeth, and powerful grasping appendages. Legions of trilobites, chitin-armored arthropods whose fossilized shells we still find all over the world, scurry across the seabed. Opabinia swims alongside them. A bizarre creature with 5 eyes and a long proboscis ending in a claw. Life forms are so diverse and wild that biologists will call this era a time of evolutionary experimentation. In the Ordovician and Silurian periods, the oceans teem with life, but the land remains dead. The continents are barren rocks, swept by winds and scorched by ultraviolet radiation. But life inexorably reaches toward new horizons. The first plants begin to appear in coastal areas. Cooksonia, tiny green stems just a few centimeters tall, lacking true roots and leaves. They cling to the damp rocks, forming the first green carpets. Slowly, millimeter by millimeter, greenery begins to creep inland, breaking down rock and creating the first soil. Following the plants, the first arthropods, ancestors of scorpions and millipedes, make their way onto land. Monumental shifts are also taking place in the water. During the Devonian period, the age of fish, giant placoderms ruled the seas. Dunkleosteus, an 8-meter-long armored fish with bony blades instead of teeth, capable of biting a shark in half. But in shallow, drying freshwater pools, a different kind of struggle is unfolding. Starved of oxygen in the warm, stagnant water, some fish develop the ability to gulp air. Their fins become fleshy, and the bones inside them thicken. Tiktaalik, the transitional link, a fish with wrists, a neck, and lungs. Propping itself up on its powerful fins, it crawls onto the muddy shore. Vertebrates take their very first breath on land. By the Carboniferous period, the planet has changed beyond recognition. The continents become covered in endless, stifling tropical swamps. The first true forests rise up. Giant club mosses, ferns, and horsetails reach heights of up to 30 meters. But there is one problem. Bacteria and fungi have not yet evolved to break down lignin, the substance that makes tree trunks woody and hard. Dead trees do not rot. They fall into the swamps, layer upon layer, compressed under the weight of new sediment. Over millions of years, this wood will transform into coal, the very same coal that will one day fuel the furnaces of the Industrial Revolution. Due to this colossal volume of vegetation, atmospheric oxygen levels soar to an unprecedented 35%. In this thick, oxygen-rich air, insects grow to monstrous sizes. Meganeura, a dragonfly with the wingspan of an eagle, patrols the skies. Along the forest floor crawls Arthropleura, a millipede as long as a car. In the shadow of these giants, early amphibians scurry about. They are bound to the water, as their eggs would dry out in the open air. But one evolutionary branch makes a breakthrough. They develop the amniotic egg, a capsule with a protective shell and its own water supply inside. It is a personal, portable pond. Amniotes, the ancestors of modern reptiles, birds, and mammals, no longer need the swamps. They are free to venture deep inland. By the Permian period, the continents merge into a single, colossal supercontinent, Pangaea. The vast interior of Pangaea is far removed from the oceans. Rain clouds never reach it. The swamps dry up, giving way to endless, sandy deserts. In these harsh conditions, synapsids, mammal-like reptiles, become dominant. Heavyweight periosaurs roam in search of tough vegetation, hunted by gorgonopsians, saber-toothed predators whose features already subtly resemble mammals. Life seems stable. It has adapted to the drought. But 252 million years ago, a giant mantle plume rises beneath what is now Siberia. The Earth's crust ruptures. The eruption of the Siberian Traps begins. Millions of cubic kilometers of molten magma pour onto the surface, covering an area the size of Europe. But even more devastating than the lava are the gases. The magma burns through deposits of coal and limestone, releasing unimaginable amounts of carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Global acid rain begins to fall, scorching the forests. The oceans warm to the temperature of a hot tub and become highly acidic, dissolving the shells of marine life. Ocean circulation grinds to a halt, and toxic hydrogen sulfide rises to the surface. This is the Great Permian Extinction, the most devastating catastrophe in the history of life on Earth. More than 90% of all marine species and about 70% of all land vertebrates vanish forever. Forests are replaced by a global carpet of fungi feeding on the decay. The end of the Paleozoic world. But life cannot be completely extinguished. Amid the ashes of Pangaea, the few survivors hide deep in their burrows. Among them were cynodonts, small, fur-covered therapsids, our direct ancestors. They survived by knowing how to shelter from extreme temperature swings and eat almost anything. Alongside them, in the shadow of the rocks, hid small archosauromorphs, swift reptiles that would eventually give rise to crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds. The Triassic period was a time of recovery on a scorched Earth. Ecosystems were empty, and ecological niches lay vacant. A fierce competition for dominance began. Pseudosuchians, the heavily armored ancestors of crocodiles, initially gained the upper hand. But as the climate grew increasingly arid, the advantage shifted to those capable of moving quickly on two legs to conserve energy. The first dinosaurs appeared, including Eoraptors and Coelophysis. They were small, fast, and deadly. Their anatomy allowed them to breathe and run at the same time, giving them a massive advantage. Meanwhile, our ancestors, the first true mammals, were losing this battle for the daylight. They were forced into the shadows of the night, becoming small, skittish creatures that fed on insects. To survive the cold nights, they developed thick fur and warm-bloodedness. To hear the footsteps of predators in the dark, their jawbones migrated to the ear, forming a complex auditory system. The tragedy of losing dominance turned out to be an evolutionary miracle. During the Jurassic period, Pangaea began to break apart. Deep rifts filled with water. New oceans were born, the Atlantic and the Indian. The climate became warm and humid. Lush, coniferous, and fern forests flourished from pole to pole. This was the golden age of the dinosaurs. They reached titanic sizes. Giant sauropods like Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus, weighing tens of tons, stripped the treetops like living cranes. The earth shook beneath their feet. They were hunted by Allosaurus, ferocious predators with powerful jaws. In the skies, pterosaurs soared on leathery wings, while in the dense undergrowth, small feathered dinosaurs made their first clumsy attempts to glide from branch to branch. Archaeopteryx, a creature with the teeth of a reptile and the feathers of a bird, became a living bridge between two worlds. The Cretaceous period brought a new revolution, this time a botanical one. Flowering plants, or angiosperms, began to appear. They evolved bright petals and sweet nectar to attract insects. It was at this very moment that the first bees stepped onto the stage. They did not just feed on nectar, they also transported pollen, becoming indispensable partners in this botanical revolution. This symbiotic relationship transformed the face of the planet, painting the green world in vibrant colors. Biodiversity reached its peak. In North America, the greatest evolutionary duel of all was unfolding. Tyrannosaurus rex, a 13-meter bone-crushing machine with binocular vision and a monstrous bite, faced off against Triceratops, encased in a bony frill and armed with 3-foot horns. In the shallow, sun-warmed seas, mosasaurs, marine reptiles the size of a bus, ruled the waters. Overhead, pteranodons glided through the sky with wingspans of 7 meters. It seemed the empire of the dinosaurs would last forever. But 66 million years ago, in the cold darkness of space, an asteroid the size of Mount Everest hurtled toward Earth. It slammed into the shallow waters of the Yucatan Peninsula at a speed of 20 kilometers per second. The flash from the impact was thousands of times brighter than the sun. The kinetic energy of the explosion was equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. Within a radius of thousands of kilometers, all living things were instantly vaporized. The shockwave flattened forests like matchsticks. Colossal tsunamis, hundreds of meters high, crashed onto the coastlines, pulverizing rocks and animals alike. But the worst was happening in the sky. Hundreds of billions of tons of molten rock and ash were blasted into space, only to rain back down. As they re-entered the atmosphere, these particles superheated, turning the sky into a giant infrared broiler. Global wildfires ignited across the entire planet. Then came the darkness. Soot and ash enveloped the Earth in a thick shroud, blocking out the sun. An impact winter began. Photosynthesis ground to a halt. Plants withered away. In their wake, the giant herbivores perish, followed by the predators. The dinosaurs, who ruled the planet for over 150 million years, die out from hunger and cold. When the smoke clears, the world looks devastated. In this apocalypse, those who could hide from the fire and cold underground or at the bottom of rivers survived: turtles, snakes, and crocodiles. Those who could fly away and feed on seeds buried in the ash also survived. Birds, the only direct descendants of the dinosaurs, and the mammals survived, our ancestors, small, furry, omnivorous creatures that had spent millions of years living in fear of the giant reptiles. Now, the world belongs to them. The Cenozoic era begins. During the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, the planet warms up once again. Dense tropical forests stretch all the way to the polar latitudes. In these jungles, mammals begin to evolve rapidly, filling the vacant ecological niches. Some become herbivorous giants, while others return to the ocean. Their hooves turn into flippers, and their bodies become streamlined. They become whales, saying goodbye to dry land forever. Meanwhile, early primates hide in the dense canopy of the trees. To leap from branch to branch, they developed grasping hands with opposable thumbs. Their eyes shift to the front of their faces, providing stereoscopic vision to accurately judge distances. But the Earth's climate is not constant. During the Oligocene and Miocene epochs, a global cooling begins. The forests begin to retreat. And then, a new, incredibly resilient plant enters the scene: grass. Unlike trees, grass grows from the root rather than the tip, allowing it to survive being eaten or burned by wildfires. Endless grassy savannas and steppes take over the continents. Herds of new giants roam across them: Indracotheres, hornless rhinos as tall as a two-story house, while saber-toothed cats hunt ancient horses. In East Africa, the shrinking of the forests becomes a turning point for one specific group of primates. Trees become scarcer, and the distances between them grow. To find food, our ancestors have to descend to the ground and cross the open savanna. In the tall grass, moving on all fours is a disadvantage. You cannot see predators, and the sun beats down mercilessly on your back. Those who can stand on their hind legs, even if only briefly, gain an advantage. They can see further. Their bodies absorb less heat from the sun. 7 million years ago, the long and painful transition to bipedalism begins. Sahelanthropus, Orrorin, Ardipithecus. Generation after generation, the pelvis reshapes and the spine curves to support the heavy head. The foot loses its grasping toe and transforms into a spring for walking. 3.5 million years ago, Australopithecus afarensis, the famous Lucy, is already walking confidently across the African ash. Bipedalism comes at a high price: back pain and difficult childbirth. But it offers the greatest gift of all: free hands. Hands that are no longer needed for walking can carry food, or hold a stick or a stone. In the Olduvai Gorge, 2.5 million years ago, something unprecedented happens. A hominid picks up a round stone and strikes it hard against another. A sharp flake chips off. This piece of flint with a sharp edge, a chopper, becomes the first man-made tool. This is the dawn of technology. With this stone, they can slice through the hide of a dead animal and reach the nutritious bone marrow. Meat provides a massive influx of energy. This energy is channeled into the body's most demanding organ, the brain. The genus Homo emerges: Homo habilis, the handyman, and Homo erectus, the upright man. Homo erectus is taller, with a larger brain. They lose their thick fur and develop sweat glands, allowing them to run marathons under the scorching sun, chasing prey until it dies of heat stroke. But their greatest achievement is the taming of fire. The flames keep predators away in the night. Fire allows them to cook meat and roots, making food soft and easy to digest. Jaws shrink, freeing up space in the skull for an even larger brain. Fire becomes the center of social life, a place where, in the flickering light, the first seeds of communication begin to form. Armed with fire and spears, Homo erectus ventures beyond Africa. As they spread across Eurasia, from Java to the Caucasus, they adapted to new conditions. Later, a new wave of Homo heidelbergensis, our common ancestor with Neanderthals, emerged from Africa. 500,000 years ago, the human world was not uniform. It was a planet of several human species. In Europe and Western Asia, trapped by advancing glaciers, the Neanderthals evolved. They were stocky, incredibly strong people with massive brow ridges and wide noses to warm the freezing air. They were masters of survival in extreme conditions. Armed with heavy spears, they engaged in close combat with woolly mammoths and cave bears. They possessed empathy. Archaeologists find Neanderthal skeletons with healed, severe fractures. evidence that the tribe cared for the disabled. They buried their dead, sprinkling them with red ochre. They painted abstract symbols on cave walls. Far to the east, in the harsh mountains of Altai and Tibet, lived the Denisovans, a mysterious branch of humanity, known to us from only a few teeth and finger bones, yet one that left a deep mark in our DNA. And on the isolated Indonesian island of Flores, dwarf humans, Homo floresiensis, nicknamed hobbits, hunted miniature elephants. But about 300,000 years ago, across the vast expanses of Africa, a species emerged that was destined to change everything: Homo sapiens. Anatomically, we were weaker than Neanderthals. We don't have their thick bones, but a cognitive revolution is taking place in our minds. We developed a complex language, not just warning signals, but the ability to speak about things that do not exist in physical reality, about river spirits, tribal laws, and plans for tomorrow. We began to think in abstractions. We drilled seashells to make necklaces, the first symbols of status and identity. We established trade networks, exchanging flint and obsidian over hundreds of kilometers. About 70,000 years ago, a small group of sapiens left Africa. They traveled along the coasts, entered Europe, and crossed the deserts of Asia. Inevitably, they encountered other humans. We met the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. What happened at the edges of the glaciers? Was it violent warfare over resources, or a slow assimilation? Archaeology and genetics show it was both. We interbred with them. Today, every person of non-African descent carries between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA, genes that helped our ancestors adapt to the cold and new diseases. But ultimately, sapiens prevailed. Our capacity for large-scale cooperation, innovation, the creation of composite tools, bows, spear throwers, and rapid adaptation left no chance for other species. About 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals disappeared. We became the only human species left on the planet. 11,000 years ago, the Ice Age ended. The Holocene arrived, an era of stable, mild climate, and humanity made the most radical turn in its history. On the hills of the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, hunter-gatherers noticed that wild wheat seeds falling into the moist soil would sprout. The Neolithic Revolution. We stopped following herds of wild animals. We cleared forests, plowed the land with stone hoes, and planted grain. We domesticated sheep, goats, cows, and dogs. But agriculture required a settled way of life. We built our first permanent settlements. Even before the rise of actual cities, at Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, people erected monumental stone circles carved with figures of lions and scorpions. This temple, built by hunters, proves that religion and the need to gather came first, and agriculture followed to feed the builders. Settlements grew. In the valleys of the great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Nile, the Indus, and the Yellow River, a surplus of grain led to a population explosion. Uruk and Sumer emerged. Ziggurats, built of clay and straw, rose to pierce the sky. States were born, and priests, kings, taxes, and armies appeared. The wheel was invented, forever changing transportation and pottery. In glowing furnaces, copper is melted, tin is added to it, and bronze is born. The Stone Age fades into the past. Swords, plows, and armor are now made of metal. But the most important invention takes place in the silence of archives. To keep track of grain and livestock, Sumerian scribes began pressing reed styluses, making wedge-shaped symbols on wet clay tablets. Cuneiform script. For the first time in Earth's history, the memory of our species no longer depends solely on the fragile human brain. Knowledge, laws, and myths can now be passed down through the ages. The Epic of Gilgamesh becomes a voice that we hear across millennia. Civilizations grow in power. In Egypt, the Nile River pulses like an artery, flooding the fields with fertile silt. Pharaohs, who view themselves as living gods, mobilize tens of thousands of peasants to quarry, drag across the sand, and stack millions of limestone blocks. The pyramids of Giza rise, man-made mountains defying eternity. In Mesopotamia, Babylon writes the Code of Hammurabi, carving the principle of an eye for an eye onto a basalt stele. Astronomers atop high towers calculate the movements of the planets. During antiquity, the world becomes even more complex. In ancient Greece, amid olive groves and marble columns, philosophy, geometry, and the concept of democracy are born. People begin to look for the causes of phenomena, not in the wrath of the gods, but in the laws of nature. The Roman Empire unites the Mediterranean with an iron grip. It is a triumph of engineering and logistics. Roman legions march along straight paved roads, aqueducts carry clean water to cities of millions, and Roman law lays the foundation of modern jurisprudence. In the East, the Han Dynasty in China and the Maurya Empire in India build their colossal states. Between East and West stretches the Silk Road, a thin thread of caravans carrying not only silk and spices, but also ideas, technology, and religions. But empires are mortal. Rome falls to the onslaught of barbarians. The Middle Ages begin. Europe becomes covered in a network of feudal castles and monasteries. At the same time, the Islamic Golden Age flourishes in the East, preserving and expanding ancient knowledge of algebra and medicine. The world shudders from new catastrophes. In the 14th century, the Black Death, a plague carried by fleas on rats, travels along trade routes from Asia to Europe. It wipes out a third of Europe's population. Cities empty and fields become overgrown. Yet the labor shortage dismantles serfdom, forcing society to value human labor and invent new machinery. War and trade continue to reshape and connect the world. The Crusades bring East and West into conflict. Sweeping across the land like a wildfire, the Mongol cavalry creates the largest contiguous land empire in history, linking Beijing to Eastern Europe and making transcontinental trade safe. And then comes the Age of Discovery. In 1492, 3 small Spanish caravels commanded by Columbus crossed the Atlantic. It is a collision of 2 worlds separated by millions of years of evolution. The Columbian Exchange begins. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, and gold flow into Europe. To the Americas come horses, wheat, steel weapons, and diseases to which the indigenous peoples have no immunity. Smallpox and measles wipe out entire civilizations, from the Aztecs to the Incas. For the first time, the world is linked into a single global network. The era of colonialism, sailing fleets, and the first wave of globalization begins. By the 18th century, the muscle power of humans and animals reaches its limit, and so humanity turns to the legacy of the Carboniferous period. We begin to mine and burn coal, the compressed energy of ancient swamp forests. The steam engine is invented. Water boils, steam pushes the piston, and the wheel turns. The Industrial Revolution changes everything. Factory chimneys blanket the sky in black smoke. Railways blanket the continents in a steel web, shrinking distances. Electricity banishes the darkness, turning night into day. Telegraph wires allow information to cross oceans instantly. The 20th century is a time of unthinkable acceleration and terrifying destruction. Technologies created to build are turned into weapons. 2 world wars grind through tens of millions of lives in the trenches, under tank treads, and in the fire of bombings. In secret laboratories, scientists penetrate the very heart of matter, the nucleus of the atom forged in the stars. The Trinity test, the first nuclear explosion in history, followed by the flashes over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ushers in the nuclear age. Humanity gains a power capable of destroying the entire biosphere, a force comparable to the impact of the Chicxulub asteroid. But this same era also carries us to the stars. The roar of rocket engines overcomes Earth's gravity. A human in a spacesuit leaves a bootprint in the gray, lifeless dust of the moon, looking back at the rising Earth. A fragile blue sphere in the infinite darkness. In the second half of the century, silicon chips and fiber optic cables create a new, invisible layer of civilization: the Internet. A global nervous system uniting billions of minds into a single information network. Today, we live in the Anthropocene. 8 billion people. We move more rock than all the planet's rivers and glaciers combined. Our cities glow from space like golden mold on the body of the Earth. We are changing the chemical composition of the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, just as cyanobacteria or Siberian volcanoes once did. Glaciers are melting once again, oceans are acidifying, and species are disappearing at the rate of a mass extinction. We are the first species in Earth's history that doesn't just change the planet, but is also aware of it. We are evolution looking in the mirror. This entire unimaginable chain of events, from stardust and colliding planets through oxygen catastrophes, ice ages, asteroid impacts, and the struggle for fire in the savanna, has led to you, the person sitting here right now, listening to this story. You are the pinnacle of 4 billion years of survival. The future of this fragile blue grain of sand in the endless cosmos is now in our hands. And what the next chapter of this great story will be is entirely up to us. Thank you for watching until the end. As always, this was Dimitri and the channel, The World Before Our Era. If you enjoyed this video, please support it by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. What topic would you like to see in the next video? See you soon!